but thanks for joining. The time is now 5:17, and I call to order our DC Prep Board of Directors meeting on November 12th, 2024. Patrick, and I'm the board chair. Our members today are, I see Colette, I see Dan, I see Emily, Hadley, Lisa, Michaela, Rashida, and Terry. Did I miss any board members? Okay, I don't think I have. Our first order of business is to review the agenda. And would somebody like to make a motion to approve our agenda for today's meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Second. All right. I will call the roll. Patrick is a yes. Colette?
Yes.
Sorry, LSU lost too, Colette.
Oh, such a bummer. Oh my gosh, so sad.
Dan?
Yes.
Emily? Yes, okay. Hadley?
Yes.
All right. Lisa?
Yes. Can you hear me?
All right. Yeah, I can hear you now. Thanks. Michaela?
Yes.
Rashida?
Yes.
Terry?
Yes.
All right. The motion carries. The agenda is approved. First order of business. Again, just welcome everyone. And we will review and approve September minutes. I'll give everyone about 2 minutes. Hopefully everyone had a chance to review the minutes ahead of time. If not, just take 2 to 3 minutes to review them now, please.
We have one amendment that we will need to make after this meeting, and we'll have it updated. Michaela noted that she was not in the last meeting and so did not second a motion. And so it turns out it was Emily who seconded the motion. So we will revise the minutes to reflect that.
Okay, can we kind of approve with the caveat that they will be revised, or do we need to wait till next time? You don't know.
I think we could approve subject to revision, subject to that explicit revision.
Yeah, we'll do that then. Okay. Does anyone need any more time? Okay, if not, could I have a motion to approve the minutes subject to a revision to remove Michaela and replace her name with Emily as the second in the motion?
So moved.
I have a second.
Second.
All right. Patrick is a aye. Colette?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Emily?
Yes.
Hadley?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Michaela?
Yes.
Rashida?
Yes.
And Terry?
Yes.
The motion is carried. The minutes are approved subject to the amendments. Okay, Laura, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to present, so give me 1 second. Okay. All right, let's see if I can make this a little bit. Look at that. Okay, I did it, and I can still see all of you. Okay, doing well. All right, so I wanted to give you the highlights that we shared with the full network at Data Day, which just took place very recently. And so thought you would also want to hear kind of the things that we briefed the network on overall. We first started off just by talking about, we are here to make sure that we are serving our students. And to serve our students, we want to make sure that we are focused on what our families have said that they care about. And what our families told us they want are these three things: a college prep education, a joyful day-to-day experience where students are known and loved, and an opportunity for students to have horizon broadening experiences where they can learn more about what it is that excites them and how they can better understand themselves in relation to the broader world. And so that is what drives our strategic plan over the next 5 years. We've named 4 strategic focus areas: college prep classrooms that spark a love of learning. That directly reflects, what our families say that they want for their children. Also, effective teachers across every classroom, because one of the best ways for families to really feel like their child is known and loved is through the relationship that they have with their child's teacher or teachers. And so they, from a lot of what they've told us, families think about effectiveness both in terms of like what the teacher is conveying that they know about the child and where that child is performing, but then also whether or not the child is progressing academically in the way that a parent can see. Strong family partnerships is obviously very important in terms of the families feeling connected and our ability to do our best work for children, and then to be an enduring organization, because we view our responsibility not only to kind of get great results in any given year, but really for families to be able to rely on us to provide great results year after year after year, right? And so like we try and remind ourselves and our team about this all the time. And then we talked about how the foundation for our 5-year plan is starting this year, and that this year's focus of our annual plan is on making sure that we have strong Tier 1 culture across all of our classrooms, that we are providing effective student support for the students who particularly need more, and that we are ensuring that we are accelerating the rate at which students are learning across all students, and that the primary way that we're doing that is to support teachers through our collaborative planning meetings. And so we talked about, day-to-day is an important opportunity for DC Prep to take a big step back and to look at a number of sources of data. So at each home campus, our teachers are looking at student culture data, student outcome data. So this is like the interim assessment results, student experience data. This is through student survey results, staff feedback, and family feedback. But in addition to the work that our teams are doing across each campus, we also try and share our trends as a network. And so some of the big trends that we shared were, first, that 100% of our campuses are meeting or exceeding our attendance goals, which is exciting. Attendance is stronger than it was a year ago. The majority of our classrooms have a platform for learning, and for the classrooms where we think more is still needed, Cassie has been working closely with her team to make sure that we have a plan for those classrooms, that we have student support plans in place for our students, and that for the most part, our student support plans are working, and our students who need more support are doing well in classrooms. There are still some places where we've got more work to do, but those tend to be students who are newer to us or who arrived to us late. And so we're actively focused on making sure that we can support those students as well. And then finally, our students are learning relative to where we were a year ago. More of our students earned a 55 or better in ELA and a 65 or better in math on the first ANET. So that means, we are making real progress on the key elements of this year's annual plan. We also shared some of our student survey results. This was a new question that we asked of our students, which was, I believe DC Prep is a good school. We weren't really sure what students would tell us, right? But we wanted to really try to evaluate, whether students believe that we are doing well. And what we saw is that more than 70, almost 74% of our students believe that DC Prep is a good school. And that is a helpful first benchmark. And this is something that we are working to continue to focus on. And we want to see this number continue to grow. We had very strong results from our families, as we usually do. So this shows the percentage of families who are either very likely or likely to recommend DC Prep to a friend. You can see here that, you know, it's like in the 90s, high 90s across most of our schools. And here is a quote that I really liked from one of our longtime families, who talks about how DC Prep is not only kind of important in terms of the work that we do every day, but also in terms of the support that we provide students after they graduate from us, which I think is a real testament to what we are trying to do in our schools every day. We also had our staff complete the Q1 staff survey. This is the percentage of staff members who agree or strongly agree with our staff survey questions, and we always try to report back, how are we doing as a network? Our strongest area, as in the past, was staff members saying that they are clear on their responsibilities and can be problem solvers at work. Also have similar rates of agree or strongly agree to last year with my school is clean. We're proud of the impact that we're having. We are working towards being an inclusive community. And areas where we have lower scores, but are roughly on the same level as in the past, is DC Prep has supported my professional growth in the last 3 months, that they see the progress that we're making towards being an anti-racist organization, and that their school has a shared vision of effective teaching. The area where we saw the biggest change in the staff survey was on the question about staff at my school are clear on how to work together to serve all students. That was an area that at first I was like, oh, that's like really disappointing that's fallen, because that's an area where we've been focused a lot. At the same time, I think there's lots of ways in which that's sometimes when you focus more extensively on something, I think it's easier to be like, oh, is it working the way that we want it to? And so that is an area where I think there's where we're focused, and where I hope that by continuing to focus there, we will see improvements. So over the next quarter, we're going to focus a lot on that. And so some of the ways that we've named that we hope we will be able to grow over the next quarter on that measure is through our collaborative planning meeting structure, which is one of the core ways in which members of a team are working together to talk about how they will design instruction for all students. Through our student support plans, each one of our schools has a lot of success stories, things that are working for their students. And there's also some students where the plans aren't working yet, but we are committed to making sure that we continue to invest the time and energy to make sure that all of our student support plans are working. And I think in doing that, that really is a place where people across a school are working together to partner, and also kind of relying on resources from the home office as well to get additional support when they still need more. And so I think that by really kind of telling the story about the student support plans, I hope that it will better illustrate how people work together successfully when we can serve students best. And then finally, with attendance, we're always working to make sure that we get all of our students to school, but particularly for students who are experiencing chronic absenteeism, it relies on a team to work together to serve students. And so that's another area where we will focus together to make sure that we're meeting the needs of all of our kids. So those are like some of the quick highlights from how schools are doing at the start of the year over the first quarter. I'm happy to take questions if you have any questions.
Laura, I'm just curious if you looked at this on a campus by campus basis, especially the staff survey, were there any differences, or was that pretty consistent across campuses?
No, there's definitely differences across campuses. And so that's why we try and say this is what is taking place at the network level, and each campus has its own story. I think if you were to dig in, you'd see some similarities across campuses, but also like a lot of things that feel unique to that campus. So EEC is off to a really strong start. We see that their scores improved a lot from this time last year, which is really encouraging. And so, every campus is just a little bit different. We'd be able to tell you, like, if you went campus by campus, there are differences, and that's why they each have their own special focus. Each campus coming out of day to day is working on their own unique priority plan for the next quarter. Everybody has some elements that are consistent, and then everybody has different elements that are unique to them based on what we're seeing at that campus.
Laura, my question is around kind of the why of I know that the survey says, hey, I don't feel this way, like, right? I don't feel that there's collaboration, but do you have another layer of analysis that kind of talks about the why they feel that way so that the solution could kind of address the why? And I would assume, to me, that's almost at the tactical level. I think that's like at the principal level. If the majority of the teachers, or not majority, a little more than half, are feeling that there isn't collaboration, to me, it almost seems like that's a challenge for the principal to kind of work on if he or she understands exactly the why that's occurring at their campuses.
Yeah. So I'll give a quick response, and then I'd invite Cassie to share more as well. But the way that the question is like specifically worded is around like, my team is clear on how to work together to serve all students. And so in some ways, like what it is specifically focusing on is some of our students who may be most challenging to support well. And I think I believe there's not always as many comments as you would need in order to like really understand just from the survey itself. It really is a product of like triangulating, like, what are the conversations that we're having every day? What are the challenges that we know are really significant on a particular campus? And then what do we see in the survey, et cetera? And I think that what this is illustrating is, for the handful of students on different campuses where we're having a harder time making sure that we're able to kind of pull together the right set of resources and plan. And so it still feels hard. I think staff members are saying, like, it's still not totally working, right? We still have issues where we need to get better, because even if we're kind of doing the things that we know how to do, there may just be gaps in either in knowledge or skill, or we just may not have enough time for this child to have a plan. Sometimes, it's like with parenting, right? It's like, it's about the consistency and the day after day, right? And so I think it could be any of those that could be leading people to say this. And so I hope that this percentage increases, both as we try more strategies to make sure that we are serving all students, and that, like, with more time and the ability to like have more at bats with some of our kids, that will also help. But Cassie, I would invite you, if you have other thoughts on things that you would share about that particular point.
Yeah, I agree with you, Laura. I think to be like illustrative, we have a grade level at one of our campuses where we received more students with autism spectrum disorder than we have in the past. And so we've been doing a lot of learning about how to serve students on the spectrum at that particular age in our model as best as we can. And so I can 100% understand why a teacher answering that question who works on that grade level would say no, because we haven't figured it out yet. I think if I were to then go talk to them and ask them, well, do you see us trying? Do you see us making progress? I would hear them say yes. I would hear them say, yes, that professional development that you brought in last week was really helpful, and we tried some strategies. And the work we're trying to do with the parents and better partnering and learning how the kid does at home, it's helping. But on an absolute basis, would I say I strongly agree that my whole team knows how to serve all kids and knows how to work together to serve all kids? The answer is no. So I think there's just so much nuance underneath that question. And you're absolutely right that it's like the principal's responsibility to try to dig into that. So when any of those adult culture, adult perception questions are low, we're having our principals really dig into it and like go back to the staff and be like, what's underneath this? Like, let's talk about this, meet with grade level teams to kind of unearth more of the stories underneath it to figure out what are the problems that the staff wants us to solve and to help the principal make decisions about which ones to prioritize solving and in what order.
Thanks, Cassie. Mary, I think I saw your hand up.
Cassie just answered my question. I was wondering how much time the principals were able to have after receiving these kind of survey results to dig deeper with the team. So thank you.
I have a kind of follow-up question, Cassie or Laura. Do you think when I was listening to you speaking, Cassie, the thing that popped into my mind was kind of knowledge management. You talked about knowledge sharing. Do you think that's part of it? Just like a better way to start sharing some of those success stories? Is it a knowledge management, knowledge sharing? Is that part of probably the problem you would think, or do you think, hey, we're still just trying to figure out because we have this unique set of students that may be at a higher rate that we're still trying to kind of piece it all together? Or do you think like, hey, we have some people that have experience and with this, we just need for them to be able to kind of share some of those success stories better. And then is it like, hey, knowledge collection and then sharing that out to broader groups, or a little, I think is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah. I think that is a really, really smart question. And I'm sure it is a mix of all of it and probably heavy on the like knowledge sharing. I wouldn't say that we are necessarily feeling like we're inundated with novel or new experiences every single day. I would say that we are feeling like we are every day tackling a lot of things, a high volume of things. And so if on its own, in our best moment, when we're able to like slow down and tackle the thing, do we have the knowledge of what to do? Probably we've experienced it before, but I do think that what your question highlights for me is like, we are sometimes moving very quickly and also experiencing sometimes like a high volume of need from students or staff or families. And the moments when we slow down and like pause to be like, let's reflect on how we've tackled this kind of thing before and what process we need to follow and how we can best coordinate and communicate. We always do better. And we always say, oh, that was so great that we slowed down, to kind of remind ourselves of like practices to tackle this kind of problem. I don't know, Laura, you might add to that.
Yeah, I was just thinking about how there are times when it's the reminder that like we have navigated a challenge like this in the past, right? Because there's some challenges that like you don't encounter like every day, right? And so I think just reminding ourselves that like we've done this, we've been able to do this, and when we were doing this before, it took a long time before it felt like it was working, right? Like we have some student success stories where it has taken like multiple years before it feels like things like click. And those are the situations I think that can feel the hardest, right? Because, while you're in it, it just feels like, gosh, feels really hard. And so I think the more that we are able to remind ourselves that like we've navigated things in the past, and to your point, I think the challenge can be sometimes like when you don't have the same people in the same roles, it's harder to call to mind those stories. Dan, looked like you had a question.
Yeah, to either Cassie or do you feel like with the volume of this and sort of, it sounds like it's rare that you have the time, and when you do have the time, you can get good outcomes. Like, is this something that having each campus have one more person, which I'm not saying is like, would that help solve this if you decided that that's how you would prioritize another headcount?
I think probably the way we think about it is when we are able to retain effective people in the same roles, that's when we start to really see a team gel and a team be able to move into like a radical problem solving space, because everyone on the team feels more confident about their own responsibilities. And so now they're able to really work together to solve things as a team. So I wouldn't necessarily say, I mean, of course, anyone who works in a school is always like, more people, more. But I don't think that actually is like the most strategic solve. I think the most strategic solve is helping our leaders and our teachers who are effective retain in their role and start to build up years, like the moments of experience, so that now they're working really effectively as teams.
Thanks, it's helpful.
Okay. Any other burning questions? If not, we're going to shift gears and we're going to talk about the financial audit. Okay, then I'll turn it over to Dan and Dan.
Thanks, Laura. Hi, everybody. Good to see you all. I'm going to just briefly summarize what the Finance and Real Estate Committee and the Audit Committee met about last week, and then would love for anyone on the committee to jump in with any additions. The big thing is that this is the point in the year where we get our financial audit, and we're very happy to share that the audit was clean with no adjustments or findings. So that's the headline. That's the key point. In the audit, there's a ton of information about our financial performance in the past year. We had a $2.5 million increase in net assets. It was a little stronger than we budgeted. The major things that contributed to our performance that you see in the audit for fiscal year 24 is that we had some increased revenue, primarily from OSSE teacher compensation and enrollment, as well as interest revenue. Those were all over budget. Expenses increased year over year because we had bonuses and invested in clinical services. The expenses as a whole were under budget. The big picture, the audit committee reviewed the budget. They voted to recommend that the board approve the budget. You do see the attached audit documents notated with a draft stamp. There are some non-material adjustments that need to be made to the, there's a year that says 23 and should say 24. So just some typographical errors that need to be fixed on the audit, but otherwise they are complete. The only other thing that I want to report that the Finance and Real Estate Committee discussed was that it fulfilled its annual obligation to look at our cash and investments and how we allocate them. All of our funds are either kept in our bank accounts or in U.S. Treasuries managed by Brown Advisory, and the committee voted on the allocation of those funds. Terry, Dan, Michaela, whoever I'm missing that I can't see on my screen, please jump in with anything else that you want the board to hear about the committee's work.
Just on the audit, I think the Markham, the firm that handles it, separate from when Dan was out of the room, just was very complimentary of Dan, Rachel, and the team in terms of their transparency, how on top of things they were, and sort of getting information early, which facilitated a less hectic turnaround this year, which in previous years it was Markham's fault. But so just everything that they said direct from Markham was very positive, both about the school's financial stability, but also the team of Dan and under.
Also great, Dan.
I'd add that we closed our financing July 10th, right after the end of this fiscal year. But the last fiscal year was very positive. We ended up with $34 million worth of cash. We're in strong financial shape to be able to serve our students going forward. So it's looking good from a financial point of view.
Thanks, Terry. Thanks, Dan. Any questions from the board? At the end of this, I think we usually take a vote for the board to accept the audit. But before we do that, any questions that the board has for me or for the committee?
Hearing none, Dan, what I'll do is, could I get a motion to accept the audit results?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all right, we'll take the vote. Patrick is an aye. Colette,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
Emily,
Yes.
Hadley,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
Kella,
Yes.
Terry,
Yes.
Rashida,
Yes.
and Terry.
Yes.
Motions carry. The audit results are approved.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Is it okay if I introduce the next topic?
Yes, please.
Okay. So first, I want to welcome our amazing Director of Data and Enrollment, Hillary, who has joined the call. So Hillary has been part of our team for a long time. She is tremendous. And she has been, we asked her to come and speak to the board about the new Aspire framework. So the PCSB is the Public Charter School Board is is our authorizer. They are responsible for holding us accountable, and they do that by having a framework on which we're evaluated, not against the framework and kind of relative to all other charters in DC. And so it's really important that we all understand what drives the framework, so that way we know how what we need to focus on to make sure that we're delivering results. Hillary is going to share an overview of what the new framework will entail, and then also we'll share a little bit about one component of the new framework, which is going to be like a school-specific set of measures that we can influence. And so I'll turn it over to Hillary to share more.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. I'm good to share my screen and present slides. Perfect. Wonderful. Like Laura said, I'm going to give a brief overview to Aspire. It's been in discussion with the PCSB for a while, and they've approved the Aspire framework. And so part of today will be a general overview, but more specifically zooming in on the school-specific performance. Because we as an organization and leadership have some decisions to make around that, and we'll be eventually coming back to you in a few months for some approval about the school-specific measures we decide on. So we want to give you this introduction today so you can start to think about it. As a reminder, there are really 3 accountability systems that we are held accountable to. The first one that I'm going to talk about today is the PCSB's Aspire system. There's also OSCE's school report card, which has been around for several years now. And then also our charter school board charter goals that we negotiated quite a few years ago. The Aspire system replaces the performance management framework, or the PMF, that was used pre-COVID for quite a few years. The PCSB recently, within the last few months, finalized the new system called Aspire. And they are starting to gather data for both some behind the scenes preview for us, but also this school year that we are in right now will be the first year where they collect data for limited public reporting. What we'll come back to in a few minutes is this specific part of it about school-specific performance, where we actually get to decide a component that we will be held accountable for. OSSE School Report Card has been out for a few years now. We expect the one for 23-24 school year to be released early December. It's always released on the schoolreportcard.dc.gov website and provides both a summative score for schools and then reports out to families, community members, policymakers, all of the underlying data about assessments, attendance, re-enrollment, quite a few metrics. Post-COVID, OSSE stopped assigning stars to schools. We used to talk about this as being a 4 or 5-star school. That's gone away, but they do still report out an aggregate score. And then our charter goals is the third one, and the one we tend to talk about the least, but is still important. Years ago, we negotiated individual goals with the Public Charter School Board, primarily around assessment and attendance metrics. And we report those out in our annual report to the PCSB every fall. And they're used by the Public Charter School Board when they do our charter reviews every 5 or 10 years. Today, we're going to focus on Aspire. And the Aspire framework is divided into 4 different domains of assessment of a school's strength in providing services to students. And the domains of school progress, school environment, school achievement, and then school specific. Within school progress, it's largely driven by our CAPE statewide assessment results in ELA and math, and our NWEA results for ELA and math in our younger grades, as well as students' performance on the Access for ELL assessment. School environments are metrics like attendance, re-enrollment, and classroom observations in our early childhood PK3 and PK4 grades. School achievement is exclusively driven by CAPE results in ELA and math. And then school specific we'll dive into today because that's what we're going to need to decide on in the upcoming months. The new Aspire system is going to classify schools into 5 different levels. And we are striving to be level 1 and level 2 schools. So either considered to be exemplary performance or strong performance. And based on the data that we've seen in the past and that we have from CAPE data from this past year, we do believe there is a very strong likelihood that all of our schools can be level 1 and level 2 schools consistently. So the part of the framework that is sort of yet to be decided by us is the school-specific performance measures. And that will contribute to 10% of our overall score. So significant, but certainly not going to be the largest driver of our overall results. And in the school-specific performance measures, we're going to have to decide on 2 separate things that we want to be measured against, which will each contribute 5% of our overall scores. We are going to have to make the case to the Public Charter School Board about why the ones we decide on are mission aligned. So that's something we're going to keep in mind as we're trying to make the decision. And they need to be things that are clearly defined, measurable, quantitative, so that the data can be provided to the Charter Board and we can validate it with them. One other important consideration is that we're going to have to keep them stable or consistent for 5 years. So what we choose now, we are going to be kind of bound to for the next 5 years. So we need to think about our changing circumstances in the environment around us to pick something that we think we will be able to be consistently successful on. We do have the flexibility to decide on different measures for our elementary and middle schools. So that's something we're thinking about if they should be the same or different. These 10 points, while they're not free points, we certainly have to provide outcomes for kids with them. We want to make sure we choose measures that are going to set us up for really strong performance and earning as close to or all of 10% of points as possible. Additionally, we don't want to choose something brand new that we've never tried before. We want to have a sense of what our performance will be, particularly because we have to stick with it for 5 years. And then additionally, there's those other considerations of we don't want it to add extra burden for our schools. We don't want to have to collect a whole bunch of new information that we've never been collecting. Again, that consistency, historical experience will help us choose something that we can maximize our outcomes on. They do have to be approved by you, whatever we as an organization kind of Laura lands on, we will come back to you and ask for approval. And they also have to be approved by the PCSB staff and board as well. So it's a multi-layer decision-making process. And then there's a couple options we have that have been defined by the charter board. The first is that we can reallocate existing points. So we could say, we actually want you to sort of count CAPE math extra, or we want you to count the at-risk scores, the scores of students who are in our at-risk population on reading, because we, serve students from underserved communities. We want to double down on that. So we could just add additional weight to an existing Aspire measure. We could look to our charter goals, which the PCSB approved years ago, and choose a metric from there that we want to use for our Aspire school specific. Another choice is the PCSB is providing sort of an item bank or a list of options that schools could choose from. So that's another route we could go. Or we could propose something totally new, or that the PCSB hasn't thought of in their item bank, or that doesn't currently exist in our charter goals or was part of Aspire. So we have a few options to sort of guide our thinking on this. So as we're thinking about this, what kind of is the overall Aspire timeline, stepping back, bigger picture? In the school year 22-23, PCSB was really drafting and finalizing their vision of the system. And with that draft vision, they took all of our data that they had access to and kind of ran the system behind the scenes, and did not report the data publicly, but projected to us internally that we would have had our Edgewood Middle and Anacostia Middle as scoring in the level 1 category, so that exemplary performance, our Edgewood Elementary and Benning Middle in the strong performance category, and then our AEC and BEC schools with that year's data scored at level 3 satisfactory. But I should note they were very high level 3 schools, so that gives us the foundational belief that what we can certainly, now that we understand the system, get all of our schools to be level 1 and level 2. Right now, with our school year 23-24 data that just wrapped up, PCSB is just now collecting that. They are going to run the data in that system and provide it back to us so that we have a understanding of our performance in that system, but it will not be released publicly. So we will get data about if we're level 1, level 2, or level 3 schools with the school year's data that just closed. And now for the school year we're currently working in, we are going to be collecting this data, providing it to the charter board next summer, and that data will get publicly reported, but they're not going to publicly assign levels to schools. So the data will all be out there, but we're not going to get publicly a level 1, 2, or 3 rating, though we will certainly know that behind the scenes. And then in 25-26, it will be fully public and in operation for the foreseeable future until they decide to change the system. And so zooming in on the school-specific timeline, Laura and I met with a representative from the charter board last month to sort of kick off the process of selecting those school-specific measures that will contribute to our overall score. This month, we are doing some work internally to try to narrow down what could be some strong options based on our historical data, and giving you all this introduction to the fact that we are going to have to decide on school-specific. In December, we will start to circulate the kind of narrowed list to our academic team, the rest of our executive team, probably school principals, to get their input on what they think the decision should be. Ultimately, I think Laura will be the decider on what we want to propose, and we will ask the PCSB staff to review it, make sure they're feeling comfortable with the direction we're going. And then we will come back to you all for approval of our school-specific performance measures, and then the PCSB will have to approve those as well. So this whole process of deciding on what they should be wrapped up by April of this year. And so in my opinion, the fun part, what are we starting to think about? We are kind of at the early phases, but some ideas we've thrown around internally already are aligned to our mission of college and career readiness for students. The percentage of students who are enrolled in advanced coursework, being our 8th graders enrolled in Algebra 1. We have the idea of Algebra for All being part of our 8th graders experience. And so that would be probably a very predictable way to earn a lot of points. Or perhaps the percentage of students in 8th grade who are earning high school credit. Again, very mission aligned for that college preparatory experience. Other things we're considering, in-seat attendance. We've been working really hard to get kids in the building and learning. Or perhaps our CAPE achievement or growth data for a smaller population. So maybe just our at-risk students, maybe a particular grade band. So still thinking about that and looking at data historically to see what might be a strong and reliable option at our middle schools. And then at our elementary schools, we've been thinking the Aspire framework is very heavy on points for CAPE for just our 3rd graders. So that's a little bit riskier to allocate more points to something that already carries a lot of weight for just one grade level of students. So we've been thinking about our charter goals for PPVT, which is early childhood vocabulary, or TIMA, which is early childhood math, knowing that a strong academic foundation starting at the early years can carry students all the way up to that college readiness, career and high school prep by the time they're in 8th grade. Also considering attendance at the elementary level. So these are some of our early options we're considering. I'm sure we will continue to explore more and really dive into what the historical data says as we start to narrow more for input from the internal DC prep community.
Thanks, Hillary. If there's any questions, I'm sure Hillary would be glad to answer questions.
One question. Progress is one of the 4 major areas in which we will be graded, or at Edgewood Elementary, recently we were the #1 middle school in the city. If we fail to advance and we're still #1, will we get knocked down for no progress? Is that a concern?
No, that's not really a concern. As long as there's 2 different growth measures that are a part of it. One is called median growth percentile. So it's relative. Are our students growing relatively more compared to other students in the city, or relatively less? So if we continue to have really strong growth at our middle schools, we will do very well on that relative measure of median growth percentile.
If they don't grow, my point is, say they're all at 100 and they don't grow at all, would we be marked down?
It doesn't quite work where students, there's I don't know, Dan, you look like you're going to jump in.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. So I think there's a theoretical and a practical answer, Terry. Theoretically, if all of our students were scoring 100% on the test and they continue to score 100% on the test, we would continue to do well on our metrics. The practical answer is our middle school being the #1 performing school in the school report card is also relative to the rest of the city, who are also, I think, across the board, not doing what we would like to as a city for students learning. So all that is to say, our students have plenty more to grow. Our students are not scoring 100% on the test. They're scoring well relative to the city. And if they continue to score well relative to the city, we'll continue to score high. But there's plenty of room for our students to continue to grow.
I see that Patrick and Dan have hands up. Patrick, do you want to go first and then Dan?
Sure. So Hillary, thanks. A couple of questions. The first one was, what's the difference when you were describing it? I couldn't really figure out the difference between progress and achievement. Is it progress just simply growth, and achievement just raw scores, but then they're still kind of related? So I was wondering how how PCSB differentiates between progress versus achievement.
Great question. So achievement is simply the percentage of students who are earning a 4 or a 5 on the CAPE, ELA, or math assessment. So that's
Okay.
pretty straightforward. Growth in the Aspire system, they've chosen to use 2 different measures. One that I was just describing to Terry is that median growth percentile. So are we growing relatively more than the rest of the city, or are we growing less than the rest of the city? The
Okay.
other measure they're using is growth to proficiency. And that says for every student, based on where they started last year for their score on CAPE, if they're a very low scoring student, they should grow more. If they're a very high scoring student, they should grow little or none. And then how many of our students are making that adequate growth to proficiency over time.
And my next question is, have we considered ANET as one of our under considerations, or is that one where it's maybe too closely related to CAPE, or just curious?
Great question. So it's not currently on the list of assessments that the PCSB allows schools to select from. It is
Okay.
also very closely, in some ways, it helps us gauge where we might be going for CAPE. And so I think it is not something we would consider because it'd be a pretty long process to try to work with a PCSB to even consider that as an assessment. Also, with all of the assessments, the PCSB gets to decide what the sort of cut score is, or what kids should reach, and what's the minimum amount of students that need to get there, and then the maximum amount to get full points. And so even if we could get the PCSB to approve ANET, I think it probably wouldn't actually be favorable for us to choose them.
Okay. And then the other thing I would just say, my last is more of a comment. I would just, on the algebra one, I would just be a little careful because there's going to be inconsistency between high schools on who's going to give you credit for completing it or not. And each of the high schools are going to have their own kind of different tests, and each of them are going to qualify differently if you are Algebra 1 qualified or if you have to take it again. So I've kind of lived this last year with my students. So I would just be careful because we send some kids to some of the top schools. Maybe some kids go to maybe not a highest performing school. That school may give them credit, but another school may not. So I just think we have to be careful if we do that. So just something to consider.
Yeah, thank you. Laura and I are continuing to meet with the PCSB, and in our initial conversation with them, the reason we thought that might be favorable is because it is dependent on if we issue credit for the students, not if a high school accepts the credit or not. And so for all of our students who earn a C or better, we issue the credit. A very fair point that not all high schools accept that credit. So perhaps a good question for us to go back to and really clarify with them before we get more serious about that one.
Thank you. I think Dan's next.
Thanks.
Yeah, could you just remind us how Aspire is dealing with SPED? Because I feel like it's going to be helpful for us in that it will adjust on a relative basis across schools.
Yeah, thank you for asking. I sort of glossed over that change, and all of us are coming to this with a different level of knowledge about the system. Unlike the old performance management framework system that the PCSB had, where it was just everything was calculated at the all student level, so for the whole school, the entire Aspire system is going to be calculated for quite a few subgroups and then weighted by subgroup. So let me break that down a little bit. So for example, special education, English learner status, at-risk status, all of the race categories, they're going to calculate, for example, CAPE achievement and CAPE growth relative to that same population. So for the SPED framework, are our SPED students growing relative a lot to other SPED students or few compared to SPED students? And so in many ways, this framework provides a lot more equity, which is one of the PCSB's goals in showing schools that perform well with populations of students that have historically performed on the lower end, SPED students, at-risk students. And it'll help schools, we hope, like us, who do relatively well with at-risk students, for example, right? And so all of the progress achievement will be calculated by subgroup. For the school specific that we're thinking about now, we can choose to have measures calculated for all students or choose a specific subgroup. So that is one thing we're considering as a way to highlight, right, the work we do with at-risk students or other smaller populations.
That's great. Thank you.
Harry.
How does that, sorry, so how does attendance work into that? Do you calculate it within the subgroups, or do you look at it as a whole? I'm sorry for the bark. Sorry. Okay, I'm gonna mute myself while you answer. Thanks, Hillary.
Yeah. So in the general Aspire system for attendance, they've moved to measuring chronic absenteeism. So the number of students who've missed 10% or more of the school year. And because every measure is being evaluated for each subgroup, SPED, English learners, at risk, that will be as well. We're thinking about in-seat attendance here initially from the school level, the all students perspective. But as we dig deeper into the data, we could consider proposing our attendance of at-risk students, right, relative to at-risk students around the city, if we think we're doing favorably on that, or our attendance of SPED students, if we think we're doing relatively well on that.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay. Hillary, thank you so much for coming to present to us. Board, we will be bringing back this topic in February after we've had an opportunity to get a little bit deeper into figuring out what we think would be the best measure for us to use going forward. So we will come back to you for approval once we get a little further in our process.
Thank you.
Thanks, Hillary.
Thanks, Hillary.
Okay. Our next topic is governance. Emily, do you want to tee up elections or do you want me to?
Can you do it? Because I might get interrupted.
Yep, no problem.
Thank
Okay.
you.
We have 4 terrific board members, current board members, who have just completed a 3-year term, and we would like to propose that the board re-elect them. And so in order to do that, I think we need to ask people to drop off before we do elections. So can we ask, so the 4 board members are Chevy, Lisa, Pam, and Dan. Maybe the easiest would be, or Dan, were you going to say something? No? Okay.
No, I was just waving goodbye for a few minutes.
Wonderful. So actually, if you could do me a favor, could you just put your phone number in the the chat, and then I'll text you when we're ready to have you back. Thank you. And Lisa, same for you. Oh, actually, just maybe Lisa, if you could just email me. I might have your, I don't have your number. Lisa, if you email me, then I can text you as soon as we can have you back.
I think I saw Lisa hop off before.
Okay.
Before you gave that instruction.
All right. Well, then I think we will, on behalf of Emily and the governance committee, we want to propose that we do re-elect all 4 members. We've spoken with each of them individually. Emily spoke with them over the summer, and each of them said that they would be glad to be re-elected for another 3-year term, which is wonderful. And so I guess we put it to a vote. Patrick, do you want to ask for a roll call vote?
Yeah.
Can we vote on them as a slate?
Huh?
Can we vote on them as a slate? So like, we propose these 4 people. So vote yes for all 4.
That's great.
Okay,
They're all willing to want to re-up. That's huge.
Yeah, no, we feel very fortunate. They're all terrific, and we'll continue to bring a lot to the board.
speaks well to you all and what you're doing.
Okay, Patrick's a yes on the slate. Colette,
Yes.
Emily,
Yes.
Hadley,
Yes.
Michaela,
Yes.
Terry,
Yes for Terry.
and Perry.
Terry, yes.
Wait, me too?
Yes.
I've only been on for a few months. What's happening here? Yes, yes, whatever. I thought, yes, that's the small.
Terry and Terry are in accord.
Okay.
Rashida.
Yes.
All right, so the slate is selected, so we can invite them back in.
Great.
Yay.
I will reach out to Lisa and Dan.
Okay. Cool.
I didn't know new members got a say on these such important matters so early in the process. Terry, it's nice to see you with your neck all sturdy and looking good.
I'm feeling healthy. Thank you very much.
Carrie, we only elect people that we trust very much. So we have total confidence in your ability to weigh in on the big decisions.
I appreciate that. I feel like a rookie.
Okay. All right. I reached out to Dan and Lisa. And now we get to the part of the meeting that so first we should all cheer for Dan. Dan, yay! We are so excited to re-elect you and have you continue to do good work with us. We're very, very grateful that you're willing to stay on and look forward to all the ways in which you're going to help make us a better organization over the next 3 years. So thank you.
Great, thanks.
And I was sharing that this is the part of the agenda that I have been dreading. So Michaela has been part of our board since 2003. And it feels very, very bittersweet to say farewell to her after a whole lot more than three-year terms. So I'm going to turn it over to Patrick, and then we'll have a couple of people who wanted to say something.
Hi, Michaela. First, just on behalf of the board, I want to thank you for your tremendous leadership, your tremendous insights, your tremendous perspectives. It's always interesting, when I first joined the board and you were the chair, you welcomed me with open arms and all of the other new members. And I really just appreciated that. I think as a parent, I saw the impact of your leadership. I felt it every day. And what you put in to the board meetings, what you put into the school, your advice, your knowledge is just tremendous. And it was greatly appreciated. And I know as a parent, I also felt it. And I just loved your perspectives. You always had some insight that none of the rest of us were thinking about from your experience and stuff. And it's just made a huge and tremendous difference. And we will surely miss you. And again, just thank you so much and appreciate everything that you've done, not only for the board, but larger for the DC Prep community. So thank you so much.
Thank you for all those kind words, Patrick. I appreciate it.
They're easy. They come from the heart. So you don't even have to write those down. It's just what you feel, you can't make that up. So.
Okay, I know that Emily, are you able to speak?
Definitely. Michaela, it's been so long. I first met Michaela when she came to the Soldiers Home, which was the site of our very first campus in our very first year. And she and Ibby and I talked with the kids, running around in this bucolic space. And she was obviously so professional and interested and calm and wise. And she had worked really closely with Ibby's husband, George. So she kind of came kind of highly recommended, and she was excited to learn more about education, and we were looking for really quality people. So it was like an easy call. And it's just amazing that, you know, whatever, more than 20 years later, she has stuck around, and not only stuck around, but done so much for the organization. So when I was CEO, I could always depend on Michaela for being calm, being wise, being thoughtful, being sympathetic, and efficient. You know, it was like, yeah, that sounds really hard. And how about these ideas? Like, let's not wallow in things. Like, let's thinking about options, and let's be strategic, and then let's do what leaders need to do. So kind of very mature and wise, and always thinking about, you know, kind of best interest of students, and being very cognizant of like so many moving parts and the complexity of our organization. So you've added so much, Michaela, as kind of a mentor to CEOs, and as a board member, and as a friend of DC Prep. And so we just so appreciate it, and feel so lucky to have found you more than 20 years ago.
Thank you, Emily. Very, very nice words, and I appreciate it.
Terry, do you want to go next?
Sure. It was an honor to be the first chair of the DC Prep Board. It's a lot of growth, and working closely with Emily Lawson was terrific. We had some good years, but one of the best things I think I ever did was have lunch with Michaela English a couple of times. When we sat down, I approached her to be the second chair, and she explained how busy she was, how many projects she was taking on. And I said, wow, you have a busy life, but this is so important at DC Prep. And she said, okay, I'll give it serious consideration. And back again for lunch, I guess a second time. And she said yes. So it was a great thrill for me to be able to turn the reins over as chair to Michaela. Two major characteristics that I would stress tonight. Michaela, your heart has always been there. I mean, you are really, you had focused on our mission and helping the kids, and you've really put your heart and all your efforts into making DC Prep a better place for the students that are lucky enough to go there. And secondly, I would echo what Emily has said about your comments in board meetings, your comments to me, your comments to I'm sure Patrick, have been so wise. You're really thoughtful, and I put a lot of weight on whatever it is that you say, because I know you've given it a lot of thought. I think you added a real gravitas to this board, and to be honest, after all these years, it's going to be tough to not have you here. I was lucky enough to be asked back, and you'd be near the top of my list, or at the top. To hope you might even consider coming back one day. But we'll miss you very much, Michaela, and thank you for all you've done for education reform in DC and for DC Prep. Thank you.
So can I take a turn? And apologies in advance for the dog that may be barking soon. My visiting dog is running out of patience with our meeting. But so this has been an amazing experience for me. And I don't really feel like I'm leaving. I feel like I'm going to still be part of the DC Prep family. But it's a little bit like being a mother and watching your child grow up. You know, I feel like you know, this was a dream for Emily and for Terry, and I saw the dream when it was a very young baby, and I have watched it become a sustainable, you know, ongoing, I would say, institution, since we started in one classroom, I think, and then now we have 6 campuses and serve, you know, a large number of students. And so watching the organization mature, watching all of us get a little bit older has been really a great experience for me. I feel a huge amount of affection for all of you. And, you know, please call upon me if there are ways I can be helpful in the future. And I have learned a tremendous amount and found it to be a really rewarding experience. So thank you all for that.
Yay, Michaela. We're so grateful to you. All right. Well, that concludes our main portion of our board meeting. So I'll turn it back to you, Patrick.
Okay, I think we will, man, I feel like, whoo-hoo. All right, so I think our next thing is to go into closed session. So could I have a motion for us to move into closed session?
So moved.
Second?
Second that.
All right, Patrick's a yes. Colette,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
Emily,
Yes.
Hadley,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
Michaela,
Yes.
Carrie,
Yes.
Rashida,
Yes.
and Terry.
Yes.
Okay, we are, motion carries. We are now in closed session. So,
Great. So that means that the management team can drop off with the exception